Sorry, the lighting here is less than ideal, and I feel really awkward knowing that I'm within hearing range of a bunch of people walking nearby on the trail behind here. Might change locations, I don't know. We're gonna power through for now. Anyways, today's video is all about how to get into running, and just a legal disclaimer, just in case, I don't know. I am not a professional coach or healthcare provider in any way, so if you followed my advice and things don't go well, please don't sue me. Thanks! Before we get into more of the advice section, let me tell you a bit more about my personal journey with running, because we all love talking about ourselves, and I feel like it offers an example that there is no such thing as a hopeless case. Everyone can become a runner. Now, I was never really an athletic child. I was always picked last in middle school PE, all that good stuff. And I started doing track in my freshman year of high school to get PE credits because I didn't want to take another year of high school PE. And at the time, I was not good at running. I could barely survive that mile in PE, let alone run for more than 10 minutes straight. But I started doing track, I worked hard every single day, and after 3 years of doing both long distance track and cross country, I had worked my way up to being a pretty decent runner. I was on the varsity team. By my senior year, I had qualified to state trials in both individual events in track and group events in cross country, and I was being actively recruited by a couple of the D3 colleges that I was applying to. I didn't apply to any Division II schools, so I don't actually know how I would have stacked up there, but that's why I put in the title that I was going to be a recruited athlete. My best distance was probably the 2 mile, but I know the mile is the only distance that the average person has context for, so for comparison sake, I guess, not to flex too hard, my PR in the mile, or personal record in the mile, was 5 minutes and 31 seconds, which is not necessarily the world's most impressive time. But I think what is the most impressive about me is my ability to improve. Over 3 years, I went from an unathletic potato to, again, an actual recruited runner, and someone who plans to make running into a lifelong habit. So if you would like to do that too, let's get started with my advice. First and most importantly, let's talk about how to prevent injuries, because that is the number one thing that will derail your running career, not only during the time you're injured, but it will decrease your motivation for the rest of your life. I think the best thing you can do is actually listen to your body. It's at times a little bit hard, especially for beginners, to differentiate between good pain and bad pain, but you will learn to identify the difference. Good pain is soreness from working hard and fatigue from working hard, whereas bad pain is like a sharp or perhaps a blunt pain that is not supposed to be there. You'll know the difference, trust me. You just have to trust your own self and your own body's intuition. Also, invest in good shoes. I don't mean to scare you off, but good running shoes can literally make the difference between life or death for your shins and joints and everything. When you're running, you apply so much force into the ground. It's like maybe 2 to 4 times your body weight. So making sure you have a good quality protective layer between you and the hard ground that you're slapping your legs into is essential. I recommend you go to a specialty running store and get fitted by the employees there. They have a lot of expertise in analyzing the way you run, also known as your gait, and telling you what types of shoes and what degree of protection you'll need. I'm just gonna warn you, good quality running shoes can cost in the ballpark of $100. I know it's a hefty investment, especially because depending on your mileage, you'll have to replace them from as short as 3 months if you're a marathon runner to maybe every year if you're running significantly shorter distances. So yeah, it is a hefty investment, but overall I'd say running is still a pretty inexpensive sport to get into, especially on the beginner level, because you don't need to buy anything else besides good shoes. You can run outside, it's free, and you can wear whatever loose, comfy clothes you already own. There's a lot of specialty gear advertised out there, but if you're at the beginner level and you don't have any pre-existing health complications, you probably won't need it. So don't bother spending your money just quite yet. It's also essential to warm up before any sort of running workout. I will show a quick clip here, but basically you want to do a couple of traditional cardio exercises that you might have done in other workouts or during your high school PE classes, and some dynamic stretching. This is different from static stretching, which is kind of like yoga, I guess, where you hold a specific pose for a long time. It's more movement, but also lengthening your muscles. Does that make any sense? And besides that, the best secret to being a healthy runner and also just a healthy person in general is to maintain your general strength and flexibility. For example, one of my biggest issues during running was my hips are kind of weak, and so that leads to not only hip problems, but problems with my joints that extend all the way down my leg. Because when my hips are weak, my knees and my shins and my calves have to compensate for it, which in turn overextends those and makes them more prone to injury. And it's not just the legs. Having strong arms and abs can be really helpful for running uphill. I know my abs were burning anytime I did a hill workout. The great thing about running is it's free to do literally anywhere. But the hard part about being able to do it literally anywhere is you have to decide which of the literally anywheres you want to go to. I'm sure what a lot of people think of when they think of running and cardio is the treadmill, but honestly the treadmill is the least fun version of running, so if that is where you got your start, like no wonder so many people hate running. So the treadmill should only be your last resort if the weather is terrible and you physically cannot go outside. Now I'm a Californian, so don't take my word for it necessarily, but where most runners from states with actual weather draw the line for bad weather is whether you will literally die from standing outside for like 30 minutes. Our next best option is the track, and again, this is less than ideal for a more seasoned runner, but I would kind of recommend it for a beginner. If you're worried that you may get hurt or dehydrated or not be able to find your way back because you're not familiar with how far of a distance and how fast of a speed your body can really tolerate, I'd recommend getting started on the track first, just to test out what you're comfortable with and where your absolute limits are without risking being lost out in the middle of nowhere. Now, I don't mean to scare you though, like the risk of getting dehydrated and dying in the middle of nowhere is very, very low. That's mostly an issue for higher level runners who are used to just like running 10 miles out into the wilderness. You probably will not be getting into that, but especially if you're running alone, which I don't really recommend, you just want to be careful for your own safety. Now that we've talked about these two options that I don't like as much, I want to talk about the best option, which is running outside, where I am right now. Okay, I moved a little bit because somebody showed up at the place that I was previously standing. But anyways, I think being outside is the superior place to run because it just offers way better motivation. One, you have to finish the distance because you are pretty much committed and locked in to finishing your loop or going out and getting back. And it's just more mentally interesting. The surroundings aren't as repetitive because you are not just going around in a circle or staying in one spot all the time. And as I kind of mentioned, your two options for running outdoors are finding a loop route. This can be local hiking trails or finding a loop through your neighborhood that's the distance you want to be running. If you download the running tracker app Strava, it actually offers recommendations for routes that other people have run near you, so definitely check that out. You can also do an out and back, which takes a lot less mental effort to like calculate the route you're gonna do. You just keep going out for one direction, and then once you've done half of the distance or time you've set your mind to, just turn around and go back. While this can be a little bit less mentally interesting than a loop because you're doing the same section twice, the benefit is that you are forced to commit to finishing the entire thing, especially the last half when it starts to get the hardest because like you literally have to finish the run in order to get back home or get back to your car. Regardless of which mapping method you ultimately pick, the one thing I recommend the most is figuring out where there may be water fountains available and making sure your route passes by those because again, we do not want you dying of dehydration. There are almost always water fountains at public parks, trailheads for publicly owned hiking trails, public schools, and a lot of places that are like specifically marked as trails through residential neighborhoods will also have a couple of water fountains along the entire length of it. Okay, now that we've talked about all the things you can do before you start running, here's how you actually get started. I mean, the literal physical task of it is put on your shoes, open the door, step out the door, and start putting one foot in front of the other. But sometimes it's not quite as easy as that. One thing I know used to be a mental block for me is just like having the confidence to be running in public. Maybe this is a hashtag just social anxiety thing, but in case this is also an issue for you, I'll let you know what helped the most for me. I know what goes through your brain. It's that people are judging you. Like, why do you have the audacity to be trying to improve yourself in public? Like, isn't that so embarrassing? And I promise you, very, very few people are actually thinking that. If anybody is, those are people whose opinions should not really matter to you in the first place. People who are actually runners, like myself and my friends who are runners, we love seeing new people getting out on the trail. First of all, we probably can't tell you're new, but even if we could, like, we love that. We want people to join our sport and to have fun doing it. And anybody who might be judging you negatively from this, that reflects very poorly on that person. It doesn't reflect anything about you. You're just doing a good thing, trying to improve your health. Something else I used to do as like a weird psychology trick for myself is just to wear like a school's running team or soccer team t-shirt as like a justification for like, I'm an athlete and this is why I'm outside running in public. This does seem like a very niche psychological trick, but I promise it worked really well for me. So if you have anxiety and embarrassment around exercising in public, maybe try that too. Alright, so now we've gotten you out the door. I promise this won't be so hard because you can do something that is as easy as you want it to be. If you are completely new to fitness in general, I recommend you start with on and off walking and running. Basically, just run or jog for as long as you can until you feel like you physically cannot keep going, and then walk until you feel like maybe you could start running and jogging again, at which point you should start running and jogging again. I'm gonna throw out a bunch of random numbers, but I'm not really a coach, so take this with a grain of salt and definitely go find running plans from actual coaches on the internet. But maybe start with 20 minutes as your first workout, work your way up to 30 if you can. These might sound like very large, scary numbers to you. They sure did when I first started, and my coach was like, oh, you're out of shape and new? Go run for 20 minutes. Like, it doesn't sound easy, doesn't sound attainable, but I promise you will survive it. The first few weeks are going to be incredibly uncomfortable, but you will get more and more comfortable with running, walking, and jogging as you practice for the next few weeks. Anyways, once you've gotten started with your running and jogging, your goal is always to just expand your comfort zone. Maybe your first time you ran for 5 minutes and you walked for 10. That's totally fine. Your goal for the next day can be to run for 6 instead, or maybe even 10 if you can work your way up to it. Then once you can run continuously for like 10, 15 minutes, your goal is to run for longer. Run farther, run faster. However you want to increase your comfort zone, pick your poison and work at it. And additionally, these are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to just pick longer versus faster. Usually they'll increase together as you get in better shape. Alright, so you've mustered the willpower to get yourself out the door the first day, and you've listened to me say all these fancy words for the ways that you will improve in the future, but I think the hardest part about getting started on any habit, especially one that is as painful initially as running, is staying motivated after your first 2 days. A lot of the ways that most of us culturally view motivation are pretty flawed. Motivation is not always just having the willpower to strong-arm you into something. Our goal with these motivation tips is not to somehow magically increase your willpower muscle. Our goal is to reduce the amount of willpower it takes you to get what you need done. First of all, have a running buddy or a running team. You can usually find running groups in your area through Facebook or just word of mouth. Having a regular schedule and people who expect you to be there will, motivate yourself to get the shoes on and get out the door. Again, because people are there to hold you accountable and to kind of also help guide you in what you should be doing today. And okay, this takes you to that first step, motivating you to just show up. Our next step to motivating you to actually do your best every day, or at least every day that you're not taking a rest day, is to run literally next to somebody. These running buddies, singular or plural, will motivate you to keep going because, they're literally next to you. They're setting the pace with you, they're running with you, maybe pushing you to go faster, or maybe you're even pushing them to go faster. This introduces a sort of social pressure to not stop. I don't know how to explain the social psychology of it, but trust me, running with other people literally next to you is so helpful for going faster, going farther, without even feeling like you're exerting yourself that much more. Lastly, another thing you can do to stay motivated is to commit yourself to a long-term goal, usually by signing yourself up for a local race. You can find these just by Googling a 5K or 10K or half marathon or whatever distance you're looking to be running. Probably go with a 5K if you're brand new to running because you can and will die in a half marathon. Because now you've paid the entrance fee and it would be kind of embarrassing to show up and literally not be able to finish the race. So now you've committed yourself to training and doing it. I also really want to encourage you to focus on improving at running as your main goal. Stuff like, I ran my 5K in 30 minutes last time. The next time I race it, I want to do it in 28 minutes or less. As opposed to I ran for 30 minutes today, so I burned such and such number of calories. Isn't that so great? Running is really a way to improve yourself and to enjoy the high that comes along with not only the endorphin release, but knowing that you're getting better than your previous self every single day. I don't want you guys to see it as a way to make up for eating, because food is fuel, not something you have to punish yourself for. And running is by no means a punishment. It's painful, but it's incredibly rewarding. Once you've worked your baseline fitness level up to being able to run for 30 to 40 minutes straight without coughing up a lung, you'll know that your fitness level is high enough to start introducing more variety in your workouts. One thing you can do is hill repeats, so find a nice hill of your length of choice. I like a bit of a longer one, maybe 3/4 of a mile, but a lot of people also recommend sprinting them, so maybe 100 meters to 400 meters. Run up that hill as fast as you can for that distance, maybe 3, 4, even more times depending on what you can survive and what your fitness level is. You can do workouts on the track, so repeats of 400s, 800s, 1200s, miles, whatever you want and in whatever combination. Again, I recommend going on the internet and finding workout suggestions from professional coaches. I know what works for me, that my coaches in the past have recommended me, but I don't necessarily want to recommend them to everyone. You can also do a long run, which is just the longest run of your week, significantly longer than anything else. You might have heard of something called a tempo run, not to be confused with the hit mobile game from 2012, Temple Run. No, it's a tempo run. This is when you sort of build up your speed to its fastest in the middle of your run, and then slow it back down again. And last but not least, you might want to include some strength training, lifting weights, all that cool stuff into your workout just to increase your general strength. Anyways, that is all of my advice for today's video. I upload new videos about student life every week, and you can visit my Instagram, my TikTok, and my second channel for some sporadic other content. See you next time!
Everything you wanted, so you're sitting grinning, babe. It's not the worst thing that